Hello?
Hello, is this Cliff?
Yes, it is.
Cliff, this is Dustin Wellness from KMSU Radio. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I am excellent. It's great to have you on the phone today.
Well, glad to be here.
Just had a few questions for you, if that's all right.
Sure. Fire when ready.
All right. Well, you have had a pretty eclectic career, so I want to kind of just start out and ask you, what kind of inspired you to become a musician?
Probably the first thing was the Beatles in 1964, was that? 63, on the Ed Sullivan Show. That probably ignited my interest in music. I'd say that was the start of it. I played in the grade school orchestra in 5th grade. I played snare drum, but I kind of wanted to be a rock and roller, so piece by piece I got different parts of the drum set. I think at age 13 I had my first rock band, and that was the very beginnings, I suppose.
I know early on, and I love this, you actually composed music for Pee-wee's Playhouse. How did that come about? I'm
trying to remember the director's name. Stephen Johnson had directed rock videos, Sledgehammer and Big Time, the Peter Gabriel videos that were very innovative at the time. He was the director of the first season of Pee-wee's Playhouse, and he was a friend of the Chili Peppers, and he was going to do a video for the band. And through that connection, I was just channel surfing one day. I happened to see an episode of Pee-wee's Playhouse, and at the time I was dabbling with my first experiments with electronic music with some very early electronic instruments, SP12 sampling drum machine, Prophet sampling keyboard, MSQ 700. That was the first hardware sequencer. So I was fascinated by all this early music computer technology. And I asked Stephen if I could score an episode of Pee-wee's Playhouse, and that's how that came about. That was my first real scoring job.
Yeah, no, that show had a pretty eclectic roundup of people composing for it as well, so maybe that kind of set the groundwork for some of the people you worked for after that?
I don't think I got any work as a result of that at all. Like a lot of my films, a lot of my projects just didn't seem to inspire the people to call me, but I suppose it sort of set a pattern in my style. The show was I thought one of the most interesting, musically eclectic and interesting things on television. Had the Residents, Danny Elfman, Mark Mothersbaugh, Stanley Clarke, and it seemed like anything goes, and that wasn't the way the rest of television sounded like, but they gave all these composers pretty much, kept them on a very long leash, and they're able to do pretty much what they wanted, and I felt the same way, so it certainly inspired me to continue, scoring stuff to picture. I thought that was great fun. And at the time, coming from, the Chili Peppers weren't billionaires yet. It seemed like working in television was a lot of money. Hindsight, I don't think it really was, but it seemed like the best paying job in the world.
Well, and when it comes to the Red Hot Chili Peppers, can you kind of give us, a story about how you wound up with them? Was it just because you knew them through Pee-wee, or?
No, I shared, I played in a band called Two Balls in the Bat, and we shared rehearsal space with the Chili Peppers. And I'd also was friends with Flea. I think we were both kind of punk rock scholars. We were both on the Los Angeles punk rock scene, and it wasn't that big. Everybody in Hollywood kind of knew each other. So I had a connection to Flea. I had the rehearsal space connection, and I was playing in the Weirdos. I think Flea was kind of moonlighting with the band Fear, and we crossed paths a lot. And when their original drummer left the band, Flea asked me to join.
And we had Jack Sherman on the show as well, and he mentioned there weren't a lot of fond memories for him with that first album and that tour. What were your feelings on that? Maybe you had a better experience.
Yeah, leave it to Jack to go public with like all the negative things. But the first tour, I think it was kind of my first real tour. So it seemed it was hard work, as I remember it. I mean, I loved getting up on stage every night and playing in front of people. But the venues were all spread apart pretty far. It seemed like we drove for like endlessly every day, 8 hours in a smoke-filled van, with 7 people sitting to shoulder. It was pretty hard work. But I don't think that first tour, the novelty of touring had not worn off for the most part. I thought it was pretty fun. But I think the second and third tour on this second album, I began to, I suppose, my interest in the lifestyle, the touring lifestyle, began to wear a little thin. But I always loved making the records. Those were great fun. The touring just seemed like really hard work. Although once you got up on stage, for an hour and a half, that was great fun.
Yeah, and that second album, Freaky Styley, is amazing. Was that a different vibe, kind of when Hillel rejoined the band after Jack Sherman left?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was different for a couple of reasons. It was different because of, basically what was a three-piece band. When you get a new guitar player, that makes quite a shift in the whole aesthetic of the group. And then having George Clinton versus Andy Gill as a producer really emphasized the funk personality of the Chili Peppers. That was part of the band's personality. We were all about punk rock and funk music, and I think when we had George producing us, we were able to kind of emphasize the funk dimension of the band. So that was very different, and I think all of us, after doing one album, which is quite an experience for a musician, the first time you do an album, it just seems antiseptic and kind of a strange. It felt like a strange process to make a record. It didn't quite feel as loose as the way we were live, but I think we were veterans. We were seasoned recording veterans for the second album, so we kind of knew a little bit more about how to record, the process of creating a record versus what we're used to of just performing live.
Well, and obviously you left, during that tour after the album, but, of course you went into the Hall of Fame recently with the group, so we assume you guys are on good terms again? Everything's good? Yeah,
I mean, I don't see them a lot. It seems like we connect every, once a year or something. I'll go to a barbecue at Flea's house or some event. But yeah, we're on good terms, I would say.
Well, I wanted to ask you, too, after you left the group, you played with the Dickies for a while, and you kind of joined right around, I would say maybe it would be a resurgence in popularity when they did the Killer Clowns and all that. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
I can't remember it seems to me I was playing with the Dickies during the time I played with the Chili Peppers.
Okay.
They were always they played locally. I did do an international tour with them, but they were always kind of like a part-time job for me. So I think I actually played with them when I was still with the Chili Peppers. Well, they were one of my favorite punk rock bands. I think the first time I saw them, they were playing at a gay leather bar in Silver Lake. And I just was amazed by them. And, they've been around since 1979, I guess. But they kind of got better, which is odd because punk rock is supposed to be about being, primitive and raw. And the Dickies seemed to be getting more polished over the years, and they just sounded better and better. And I realized that they just wrote great songs. They had were always writing new material, but their old stuff was just classic punk rock. They were very highly melodic. Leonard had a really great and unique voice, and they were just one of my favorite bands. So it was great fun playing with them, and they were hysterical to tour with.
Well, they opened for the Chili's a couple times too. I assume that's how you guys met up.
That's not how I met them. The Chili Peppers kind of aspired to be part of the punk rock scene, and after a while, they kind of just didn't really fit in that world.
Sure.
But in the early days, we were trying to be a part of the local punk rock scene, and that's how those are the gigs I remember. Were I forget, the Starlight Ballroom, I think, was one gig with the Dickies. But no, that's not how I met them. I kind of knew them before all that.
I wanted to backtrack a little bit and ask you about your time playing with Captain Beefheart. I mean, your resume is, as I mentioned earlier, pretty eclectic. So, I mean, you played with him in his last album. Was that a pretty favorable experience, or I mean, were you guys pretty close?
No, it was never close to Don, really. That was a kind of a whirlwind experience. I think the whole thing was done in about 6 weeks. I think we rehearsed for about 4 weeks, recorded in 2, and then it was over with. We did a video to promote the album, and but it was an intense 6 weeks. The rehearsals were his music is just very difficult to play. It's a whole different vocabulary on the instrument, which is what attracted me to it. It was just you played drums in a completely different manner than any other recording artist I can think of. A lot of the music was, non-repeating phrases. There was very little repetition in his music, so you were required to remember very long phrases of guitar or drums or whatever your respective instrument was. And Don actually couldn't repeat the stuff. He couldn't remember the stuff himself. He would vocalize or sit down at the drums and play something. And if you didn't have your tape recording, it was, it was lost forever. So you'd have to work out these really long phrases and like do it overnight. So it was, to me, he is one of my all-time favorite artists. I still listen to his music. I was a fan of his since I was 14 years old. His music had always been, more mysterious than anybody else's. I just couldn't figure out how he put the stuff together, how the guys played it, and, what inspired him to write the music that he did. So to have a front row seat to that process was probably the most influential musical project I had ever done.
So with that being said, I know you eventually went back to composing pretty much at a full-time basis. Did that experience kind of help you to maybe mold your approach to composing for films? Yeah,
definitely. Although, I can't think of anybody except for possibly Tom Waits that you can actually point to and say, he sounds a little bit like Captain Beefheart. I don't think what I do sounds like his music either, but I think he definitely had an influence on me. I mean, I think the thing I took away from that experience was that he pretty much took whatever came into his head and made music out of it. There was no inhibition. He was Trout Mask Replica. Supposedly, he sat down and played piano for a weekend for the first time, and that was Trout Mask Replica. And He took the parts, and the band members kind of sculpted it into, or edited it into what eventually became the 28 songs. So I think I learned from him this idea that you don't need a lot of formal training to be able to express yourself musically. I've got, probably like 20 instruments in the house, all of which I can't really play. But through the, the magic of, computer word processor style editing, I'm able to kind of cobble together compositions that sound like continuous performances. So, I took a lot. I learned a lot from the experience with Beefheart.
And when you eventually went back and started composing more full-time, what were your reasons? Just kind of getting burnt out on being the rock drummer, or was that always just something you wanted to get back to?
Well, Pee Wee's Playhouse was my first composing, so I wasn't returning to anything. That was something new. And, I guess just getting older, I felt like I kind of did it with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I kind of had the rock and roll experience. And I was becoming fascinated by the influence of computer technology on music. And I also saw a way for me to, express myself and write music, not being able to play any instruments other than the drums, I kind of saw the possibilities for being a composer. So, and part of it was probably just age. I just felt like I'm not sure I want to go out on tour again and do that anymore. And I think I liked the sort of just the broader creative possibilities of being a composer versus being a drummer. And I think I forgot one other thing is I began to be alarmed at the tinnitus, the ringing in my ears of playing drums night after night in a really loud band. And that kind of spooked me. And that was, sounds kind of small, minor, but that was had a big impact on my wanting to get away from the drums and into something quieter.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you have made a name for yourself composing films, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and Wonderland, Pump Up the Volume. So, I mean, obviously it was a successful transition for you.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything you have coming up now or any upcoming projects maybe? Yeah,
there's an HBO film that came out a couple weeks ago. I think it's still airing, called The Normal Heart. There is a television series on Cinemax, The Nick. It's a period medical drama directed by Steven Soderbergh, and I think there'll be 10 one-hour episodes of that. And I'm working on a video game called Far Cry 4, which I don't know when that comes out. These video games have a very long gestation period. I have a documentary film about Nicholas Refn, about the making of Only God Forgives. That's, I think, coming out in Europe in the next month. I'm not sure when it will be released here. And that's about it.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of stuff going on. So do you have any desire to go back to maybe making albums? I know you're not interested in touring, but or are you just kind of busy with all the projects you got going on?
No. Flea told me a few years ago, he said, we don't make any money on our albums. We make our money on touring.
Sure.
And I said, why is that? He said, well, why would anybody pay for something they can get for free? So no, I've never been, I haven't been attracted to the idea of making a record.
Well, I mean, you've obviously already put your name out there and done more than most people have, so I guess there's nothing really more to prove.
Well, the records just don't make any money. I put my soundtrack albums out, and I don't see the point, frankly.
Sure.
I'm pretty happy where I am doing films, and this year branched out to doing television for the first time, which is a switch. And the first video game, that's kind of cool. But, I've kicked around the idea of performing live. That's a possibility, but at the moment, I'm not putting a lot of hours into putting a show together yet.
Well, again, Cliff, it's been an honor having you on the show. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with? Any final thoughts?
No, I can't think of any.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Cliff. It means a lot to me.
All right. Well, good luck, and thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.